All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going to unpeel the really profound, kind of unsettling layers of Albert Camus' 1947 masterpiece, The Plague. We're going to see exactly why this book isn't just a classic novel, but is actually considered the ultimate survival guide for living in an unpredictable, completely chaotic world.
Picture this. You wake up one morning and your entire city is just cut off, abruptly sealed away from the outside world by a deadly, completely invisible pathogen. So what actually happens when a bustling city is forced to lock its gates, trapping every single person inside alongside their absolute greatest fears? That's the terrifying scenario we're exploring, and honestly, it's a scenario that might hit a little too close to home for a lot of us right now.
So this exact nightmare unfolds in the coastal Algerian city of Oran, and it's crazy how fast things escalate. It starts off in April, pretty innocuously, well, as innocuous as dead rats appearing in the streets can be. But by July, a ruthless total quarantine is enforced. No one goes in, no one comes out. By August, the city is just entirely overwhelmed. We're talking mass cremations because the death toll is surging into the hundreds every single day. Finally, things decline and the gates reopen in January, but by then, the city and its people are just forever changed.
To put that into perspective, we're talking about 200,000 people. Suddenly, 200,000 citizens find themselves literally imprisoned within their own city walls. They are completely cut off. They're forced to endure this collective destiny of exile, relentless fear, and this really agonizing separation from their families and loved ones. All normal life, commerce, ambition, it just grinds to a terrifying halt.
Now you might be wondering, how do people react to this at first? Well, total denial. The authorities completely deny the threat. And this perfectly illustrates a major point made by the main character, Dr. Rieux. He observes that it is incredibly difficult for humanity to comprehend mass suffering until it's literally right in front of them. It's like our brains just can't process it. As Camus writes, to the human mind, a dead man has no substance unless you've actually seen him dead. It's a fatal flaw in our psychology, really. We just have this absolute inability to grasp an abstract disaster until it knocks on our own front door.
And this brings us to a massive, absolutely crucial layer of the story. Because Camus isn't just writing a medical thriller here. He uses this biological quarantine as a really stark allegory. On the surface, sure, we have the biological reality of the bubonic plague, an invisible pathogen forcing a physical lockdown. But on a deeper level, it represents Nazi fascism. It's an invisible societal rot that forced a moral quarantine on the occupied populations of Europe.
To really get why he wrote it this way, we have to look at Camus' own life. He wrote this during World War II, while he was actively risking his life in the French resistance as the editor of the underground newspaper Combat. He witnessed firsthand how totalitarianism infiltrates and dehumanizes a society, spreading exactly like a pathogen. He recognized that fighting oppressive fascist ideologies demands the exact same exhausting, constant vigilance as fighting a deadly virus.
Okay, let's peel back the final layer and get to the real philosophical core of this explainer. Camus' concept of an absurd universe. So what is the absurd? Well, it's the fundamental clash between humanity's desperate, rational search for order and meaning and the completely irrational, indifferent reality of the universe. We desperately want the world to make sense, right? We want justice, we want logic. But the universe? It responds to that desire with absolute chaotic silence.
The plague is just the ultimate symbol for this absurdity because it kills indiscriminately. It proves we live in a universe that simply does not care about human suffering. As the book suggests, the evil in the world often comes from sheer ignorance. The disease takes the young, the old, the kind, the wicked, totally without prejudice. It's just an unthinking, unfeeling force of nature.
So how do people actually cope with all this meaninglessness? Well, Camus maps out a few really fascinating archetypes to show our different responses. You've got Dr. Rieux, the healer, who responds with tireless empirical medical work. Contrast that with Cotard. He's the opportunist. He actually profits from the chaotic black market. Then there's Rambert, a stranded journalist who desperately tries to escape but ultimately chooses to stay out of solidarity. And finally, Father Paneloux, the theologian, who initially tries to rationalize all this horrific suffering as divine punishment.
And for a bit of dark humor that perfectly captures this whole absurd vibe, Camus introduces this minor, totally bizarre character known as the man who spits on cats. Literally, it's just this old guy who finds his daily purpose by luring stray cats to his balcony with torn paper just so he can spit on them. It sounds crazy, but it makes a point. In a universe totally devoid of grand meaning, people will invent their own bizarre, meaningless little routines just to impose a tiny sliver of order on their day.
But look, Camus doesn't just leave us to wallow in despair. No way. He actually gives us a formula for what he calls existential revolt. It's 3 steps. First, recognize the absurd. Just stop pretending the universe has some hidden fair plan. Second, absolutely reject passive despair. Don't just give up. And third, purposefully choose human solidarity. Basically, you rebel against a meaningless universe by actively choosing to care for your fellow human beings.
I love how Dr. Rieux grounds this whole lofty philosophy. He insists that his relentless, dangerous medical work isn't grand heroism at all. Actually, scratch that. He actively dislikes the idea of heroism. To him, it is simply a matter of common decency. He's not out there looking for a medal. He doesn't think he's a savior. He just sees sick people and knows his job is to try and heal them. It's an incredibly pragmatic, incredibly humble way of fighting back against the darkness.
Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Reading this today is literally like looking in a mirror. This sudden bureaucratic denial at the start, the agonizing separation from loved ones, checking the daily death statistics obsessively, citizens forming improvised volunteer health squads, it profoundly echoes what we all went through globally during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's like Camus perfectly diagnosed the psychological life cycle of a lockdown society decades before we actually lived through it.
Even when the gates of Oran finally reopen and people are celebrating, Camus leaves us with a pretty haunting warning. He says the plague, and remember that could be a biological virus, an oppressive political ideology, or any existential threat, it never truly dies. It can lie dormant for years and years in furniture and linen chests, just waiting patiently to wake up and strike a happy city all over again. It's a sobering reminder that our vigilance can never, ever afford to rest.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, here's the crucial question to leave you with. What is the invisible enemy in your world right now? And more importantly, how will you practice common decency to fight it? The absurdity of life is pretty much a constant, sure, but so is our ability to choose solidarity. Take a moment to think about your own modern plagues and the daily, decent actions you can take to revolt against them. Thanks so much for joining me today to explore this absolute masterpiece.